Let us journey back to the height of the Roman Empire, a time of unprecedented power and grandeur, a time of emperors, gladiators, and philosophers. At its zenith, the Roman Empire stretched from the British Isles in the north to the north deserts of Africa in the south, and from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia in the east. This was an empire where diverse cultures, languages, and traditions blended together under the shadow of the Roman eagle. It was a time of opulence and decadence, of innovation and conquest, and of cultural and intellectual flowering that left an indelible mark on the annals of human civilization. Picture the city of Rome in this era, the heart of the empire, pulsating with life and activity. The city's grandeur, reflected in its towering monuments, expansive public spaces, and lavish villas, was a testament to the empire's might and prosperity. Rome was a bustling metropolis, a city of contrasts where magnificent temples and luxurious palaces stood alongside crowded tenements and bustling marketplaces. The city's streets were alive with the sounds of vendors hawking their goods, children playing, and the constant hum of human activity. At the same time, the city was also a place of quiet reflection, with serene gardens and tranquil public baths, offering a respite from the urban bustle. The people of Rome were as diverse as the city itself. There were the patricians, the wealthy aristocrats, who held the highest offices and wielded immense political power. They lived in grand villas adorned with elaborate mosaics and fresco, surrounded by lush gardens and attended by numerous slaves. Their days were filled with political maneuvering, public duties, and elaborate feasts and entertainments. Beneath the patricians were the plebeians, the common people of Rome. They were the backbone of the city, working as farmers, traders, craftsmen, and laborers. Despite their lower status, the plebeians had their own political institutions and were vital to the functioning of the empire. Life in the Roman Empire was not just about politics and power, but was also rich in cultural and intellectual pursuits. The Romans were great admirers of Greek culture and learning, and many of the empire's greatest thinkers and artists were heavily influenced by Greek ideas. Philosophy, literature, and the arts flourished under the patronage of the emperors and the wealthy elite. The works of poets like Virgil and Horace and philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius continue to be read and admired to this day. Yet life in the Roman Empire was also marked by struggle and hardship. The empire's vast size and cultural diversity made it a challenge to govern. There were frequent uprisings and rebellions, especially in the more distant provinces. Slavery was widespread, and the lot of the slaves was often harsh and brutal. The gap between the rich and the poor was vast, and social mobility was limited. Despite these challenges, the Roman Empire managed to maintain its cohesion and stability for several centuries, a testament to its administrative efficiency and military might. But life in the Roman Empire was not just about survival and struggle. It was also about enjoyment and celebration. The Romans were known for their love of games and spectacles. The Colosseum, the largest amphitheater in the empire, was the venue for thrilling gladiatorial contests and wild beast hunts. The Circus Maximus, a massive stadium, hosted thrilling chariot races that attracted tens of thousands of spectators. These spectacles, often sponsored by the emperors and wealthy citizens, were not just forms of entertainment, but also important tools for maintaining social order and promoting Roman values. Religion was another integral part of life in the Roman Empire. The Romans practiced a polytheistic religion, worshiping a pantheon of gods and goddesses. They believed in the divine origin of their city and their empire, and performed elaborate rituals and sacrifices to ensure the favor of the gods. Over time, the Roman religion absorbed elements from the various cultures under its rule, leading to a rich and diverse religious landscape. As we delve deeper into the life and times of the Roman Empire, we will explore the intricate social hierarchy, the political, nations, the intellectual pursuits, and the daily struggles and joys of the people who lived under the shadow of the Roman eagle. We will also examine the factors that led to the empire's decline and fall, and the legacy it left for future generations. As we journey through this fascinating period of history, let us remember that the Roman Empire was not just a political entity, but a vibrant and diverse civilization, a melting pot of cultures and ideas that shaped the course of human history. In this journey back in time, we have already begun to explore the grandeur and complexity of life during the peak of the Roman Empire. From the opulence of the patrician villas to the humble dwellings of the plebeians, from the intellectual salons to the bustling marketplaces, from the grand spectacles in the Colosseum to the tranquil quiet of the public baths. The Roman Empire was a world of contrasts, a world of power and struggle, of culture and learning, and of human aspiration and achievement. As we continue this journey, let us immerse ourselves in this fascinating era, learning from its lessons, appreciating its accomplishments, and marveling at its enduring legacy. As we delve deeper into the remarkable fabric of the Roman Empire at its zenith, let's journey through the vibrant streets of Rome, the bustling heart of the empire. Imagine the sight of grand edifices and public structures like the Colosseum and the Pantheon that punctuated the city's skyline. These architectural marvels were a testament to Rome as unparalleled engineering prowess, and they continue to captivate us in the present day. The most common dwelling in Rome was the insula or apartment building. These structures were often built cheaply and could be prone to fires and collapses. However, this was the everyday reality for most Romans, as only the wealthy could afford private homes. These domes were luxurious private residences with rooms, arranged around a central courtyard often adorned with intricate mosaics and fresco. In the Roman society, the family was perceived as a fundamental unit. The paterfamilias, or father of the family, held an almost absolute power known as patria potestas over his kin. This power extended over his wife, children, and slaves, binding them into a single economic and legal entity. However, contrary to many preconceived notions, Roman women enjoyed a significant degree of freedom compared to their contemporaries in other ancient societies. They could own and inherit property and had the right to divorce. Slavery was an integral part of the Roman economy and society. Slaves performed an array of tasks from domestic chores and tutoring to manual labor in the fields and mines. However, the life of a slave was far from simple. Their treatment largely depended on their masters. Some slaves were treated relatively well, while others were subjected to severe hardships. The Romans were renowned for their advancements in engineering and public health. They built an intricate network of roads and bridges to expedite trade and military movement. Their aqueducts ingeniously transported fresh water from distant sources into cities and towns, facilitating public baths and latrines, and upholding a high standard of sanitation. The Roman diet was simple, but nourishing, with wheat and barley serving as staples. They enjoyed a variety of fruits, vegetables, and legumes, and the wealthier Romans could afford meat, fish, and exotic spices. The Romans were also known for their love of wine, which was consumed at all meals and social occasions. Education was highly valued in Roman society. Wealthy Romans often hired private tutors for their children, while the less affluent sent their children to public schools. The curriculum was rigorous, focusing on reading, writing, arithmetic, and moral conduct. Religion permeated every aspect of Roman life. The Romans worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each governing a different aspect of life. They believed in the importance of maintaining a proper relationship with the gods through rituals and sacrifices, a practice known as pietas. Despite its grandeur, the Roman Empire was not devoid of social issues. Poverty and class disparity were rampant, and the gap between the rich and the poor was starkly visible in the city's urban landscape. Public entertainment such as gladiatorial games and chariot races were often used as a means to divert the population's attention from these societal problems. As we step back and view this intricate tapestry of Roman life, we find a society characterized by a blend of remarkable achievements and profound challenges. From their architectural marvels to their social structures, the Romans crafted a civilization that continues to influence our world today. As we close our eyes and drift into sleep, we carry with us the echoes of this ancient world, reminding us of the indelible human capacity to create, adapt, and endure. As we delve deeper into the Roman Empire at its zenith, let's explore the remarkable city planning and infrastructure that underpinned its prosperity. Intricate designs, remarkable efficiency, and the use of advanced building materials were characteristic of Roman city planning, reflecting a society that valued organization, practicality, and luxury. At the heart of every Roman city was the Forum, a public square that served as the central hub for political, economic, and social activities. The Forum was typically surrounded by important government buildings, temples, and markets. It was here that citizens gathered to discuss politics, engage in trade, or simply socialize. Larger cities like Rome had multiple forums, each with its unique identity and purpose. A city's grandeur was often epitomized by its monumental structures. The most famous of these is perhaps the Colosseum in Rome, an engineering marvel that could accommodate up to 50,000 spectators. It was used for public spectacles such as gladiatorial contests, mock sea battles, animal hunts, and executions. But lest we think all Roman cities were adorned with such grandiose structures, it's worth noting that smaller towns and cities had their own amphitheaters, albeit on a more modest scale. A quintessential feature of Roman city planning was the grid system. Roads were laid out in a grid pattern with the two main roads, the Cardo and Decumanus, intersecting at the center of the city. This efficient layout facilitated easy navigation and had the added advantage of dividing the city into manageable blocks. The streets were often lined with shops and stalls, creating a lively and bustling atmosphere. But the Romans didn't just excel at city planning. They were also masters of infrastructure. Their aqueducts, for example, were a marvel of engineering, using gravity to transport water from distant sources into the heart of the city. The Romans understood the importance of clean water for the health and well-being of their citizens, and their aqueducts, some of which are still in use today, are a testament to their foresight and ingenuity. Not to be overlooked is the Roman sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, another engineering feat that greatly improved the sanitation and hygiene of the city. It was a vast underground network that carried away waste and stormwater, maintaining cleanliness and reducing the risk of disease. Roman homes known as domus were equally impressive. In cities, these homes were often part of insulae, a kind of multi-story apartment building. The ground floor was typically reserved for shops or businesses, while the upper floors housed the living quarters. Wealthier Romans, however, lived in detached houses with multiple rooms, a central courtyard, and often private baths. The baths were not merely a place for hygiene, but also a social center. The grand baths, like the baths of Caracalla in Rome, boasted an array of facilities including hot and cold baths, saunas, gymnasiums, and even libraries. Patrons could enjoy a leisurely soak, exercise, or engage in intellectual discourse, all under one roof. From their city planning and infrastructure to their homes and social centers, the Romans demonstrated a deep understanding of urban living. They recognized the need for organization, cleanliness, leisure, and community, and implemented these principles in their designs. This attention to detail, coupled with their technological prowess, contributed to the high standard of living during the peak of the Roman Empire. As we continue our journey, we will further explore the Roman lifestyle, their food, clothing, and entertainment, all of which played a significant role in shaping the unique culture of this great civilization. But for now, let us take a moment to appreciate the remarkable planning and infrastructure that underpinned the prosperity of the Roman Empire at its zenith. As we continue our journey into the past, we now find ourselves at the heart of the Roman Empire, its bustling capital, Rome. The city stood as a testament to the empire's grandeur, a place where one could witness the full breadth of Roman life and culture. Indeed, Rome was the epitome of what it meant to live during the peak of the Roman Empire. As we wander through the ancient city in our minds, we first come across the famous Roman baths, or these were not merely places for hygiene, but served as social hubs where Romans of all social classes would gather to gossip, conduct business, and relax after a long day. These baths were architectural masterpieces, boasting large heated pools, steam rooms, and gymnasiums. Some, like the baths of Caracalla, even housed libraries, lecture rooms, and shops. The Romans took great care in their personal hygiene, and these baths were a testament to that commitment. Stepping out of the warmth of the bathhouse, we find ourselves on the bustling streets of Rome. The city was a hive of activity. Streets and alleys were filled with vendors selling their wares, from fresh produce, fish and meat, to clothing and jewelry. Slaves bustled about carrying out their masters' orders. There was a constant hum of conversation, haggling, and the clatter of carts and chariots. Our path leads us to the Grand Forum, the heart of Roman public life. Here one could find the great temples, the Senate House, and the markets. It was in the Forum that the citizens of Rome would gather to hear important speeches, witness trials, and participate in public affairs. The illustrious marble buildings reflected the sun, creating an almost ethereal glow that must have been awe-inspiring to the citizens of Rome. Just beyond the Forum, we find the Circus Maximus, the great stadium where Romans would flock to witness the thrilling chariot races. These events were immensely popular, and the stadium could hold up to 150,000 spectators. The air would be filled with the roar of the crowd as they cheered for their favorite charioteers, adding to the exhilarating atmosphere. Venturing further, we come across the Colosseum, the grand amphitheater that was the venue for gladiatorial contests, mock sea battles, and other public spectacles. Here, Romans would gather to watch these violent yet captivating performances. The Colosseum could hold upwards of 50,000 spectators, and the elaborate shows were often sponsored by emperors as a means to gain popularity with the public. As the day winds down, we find ourselves in the residential districts of Rome. The wealthy lived in grand villas adorned with beautiful mosaics and fresco, while the less fortunate resided in insular or apartment blocks. These were often cramped and lacked basic amenities, reflecting the stark divide between the rich and the poor in Roman society. As the sun sets, the city is illuminated by oil lamps, casting a warm glow on the stone buildings. The streets are quieter now, but the city is far from sleeping. In taverns and inns, Romans gather to eat, drink, and revel in each other's company. Music and laughter fill the air, adding to the lively atmosphere. As we conclude our journey through the day in Rome, it becomes evident that life during the peak of the Roman Empire was defined by a vibrant social scene and appreciation for the arts, and a strong sense of community. It was a period of unrivaled prosperity and cultural advancement, the impact of which can still be felt today. In our next section, we will delve deeper into the daily lives of the Roman citizens, exploring their routines, their beliefs, and their personal lives. We will discover how they lived, loved, and thrived in this grand empire. So for now, close your eyes and imagine the glow of the Roman lamps, the hum of the city as it goes about its nightly routines, and the distant laughter from a nearby tavern. Let the sounds and sights of ancient Rome lull you into a peaceful sleep as we prepare for our next journey into the past. As we continue on our journey through the Roman Empire at its peak, we find ourselves landing in the bustling heart of the empire, Rome herself. It is important to remember that Rome was not just the capital, but a symbol of the empire's might, wealth, and grandeur. The city was a bustling metropolis, home to over 1 million residents, a figure that was indeed staggering for the era. Rome was a melting pot of cultures, languages, and traditions, all coexisting under the strong edifice of the Roman law and order. The city was a marvel of engineering and architecture, with grand structures like the Colosseum, the Forum, and the Pantheon. The streets were bustling with commerce, with traders from all corners of the empire selling their goods. The sounds of the city were a constant hum, from the clatter of the chariots on the cobblestones to the chatter of the citizens in the baths and taverns. Amidst this bustle, the average Roman citizen led a life that was in many ways not so different from our own. They woke up at dawn, had a light breakfast, and then went about their day's work. Many Romans were engaged in commerce, while others worked as craftsmen, soldiers, farmers, or slaves. Lunch was a quick meal, often eaten on the go, while dinner was a more elaborate affair, often shared with family and friends. Despite the grandeur of the city and the empire, life was not easy for the average Roman citizen. The gap between the rich and the poor was wide, and poverty was rampant. Many Romans lived in cramped multi-story apartment buildings known as insuli, which were often unsafe and unsanitary. Fire was a constant threat in these structures, and the Roman fire brigade was a vital part of the city's infrastructure. Yet despite these challenges, Roman society was remarkably resilient and adaptive. The Romans were great innovators, and they developed many technologies that we take for granted today. They had a complex system of aqueducts to bring fresh water into the city, and a network of roads and bridges that connected the far-flung corners of the empire. They had public baths, gymnasiums, and libraries. And they valued education and the arts. In terms of culture, the Romans were great enthusiasts of the theater, and plays were a popular form of entertainment. Epic poetry, philosophy, and history were also highly valued, and the works of great Roman writers like Virgil, Horace, and Livy have survived to this day. The Romans also loved their sports and games. Chariot races were a popular pastime, and the Circus Maximus, the largest stadium in Rome, could hold up to 250,000 spectators. Gladiatorial games were also a major attraction. Although they were a brutal and bloody spectacle, religion played a central role in Roman life. The Romans were polytheistic, worshipping a pantheon of gods and goddesses. Temples dedicated to these deities dotted the city, and religious festivals and ceremonies were a regular part of Roman life. The emperor himself was considered a divine figure, and his cult was an important part of the state religion. As we wrap up this section of our journey through the Roman Empire, it's important to remember that Rome was not just a city, but a symbol. It was the heart of an empire that spanned 3 continents, a testament to the ingenuity, ambition, and resilience of the Roman people. Life in Rome was a microcosm of life in the empire at large, filled with all the complexities, contradictions, and challenges that come with being a part of one of history's greatest civilizations. As we move forward, we will delve deeper into the intricacies of Roman society, exploring the lives of its people, its institutions, and its culture in greater detail. As the sun sets on another day during the peak of the Roman Empire, we find ourselves exploring the cultural and social aspects of life during this period. The Romans, much like us, sought entertainment and leisure activities to fill their free time. Many of these pursuits are still familiar to us today, with theaters, baths, and stadiums playing a significant role in Roman society. An integral part of Roman culture was the theater, a forum for both entertainment and social interaction. Performances were diverse, ranging from tragedies and comedies to pantomimes and mimes. Roman theaters were grand constructions with seating for thousands of spectators. They were often located in the heart of the city, adding a vibrant pulse to the urban landscape. These performances served not just as a means of amusement, but also as a platform for social commentary, often reflecting the political and social issues of the time. Alongside the theater, the Romans also found amusement in the gladiatorial games. These were brutal affairs, with gladiators often fighting to the death. Despite their violent nature, the games were extremely popular, drawing crowds of spectators from all social classes. The spectacle was a powerful demonstration of Roman power and the might of the Roman military. The games were also a way for the emperors to gain favor with the masses, often sponsoring lavish spectacles at their own expense. However, it wasn't all violence and drama. The Romans also appreciated the finer things in life. Baths known as thermae were a common sight in Roman cities and towns. These were not just places for bathing, but also for socializing, conducting business, and even exercising. The larger baths were architectural marvels, boasting heated floors, steam rooms, and ornate mosaics. It was a daily ritual for many Romans to visit the bathhouse, a testament to the importance of cleanliness and hygiene in Roman society. Roman cuisine, another fascinating aspect of their culture, was diverse and sophisticated. The diet of a Roman citizen would vary greatly depending on their social status. The wealthy Romans indulged in extravagant feasts with dishes made from a variety of exotic ingredients. These banquets were often elaborate affairs, lasting several hours and accompanied by entertainment. On the other hand, the diet of the common Roman citizen was more modest, typically consisting of grains, fruits, vegetables, and occasionally meat. The social structure of the Roman Empire was rigid, with a clear distinction between the aristocratic elite and the common citizens. At the top were the emperors and the senatorial class, followed by the equestrians and then the plebeians. Slaves, who were considered property rather than citizens, were at the bottom of this hierarchy. Despite these social divisions, there was a degree of social mobility within Roman society. Through military service, financial success, or political ambition, it was possible for individuals to rise through the ranks. This relative social mobility, along with the promise of Roman citizenship, made the empire an attractive prospect for many outside its borders. Education was highly valued in Roman society. Children from wealthy families were often tutored at home, learning a curriculum that included literature, history, and philosophy. The less privileged, however, often received a more basic education, if any at all. Regardless of social class, education was seen as essential for preparing young Romans for their roles as citizens and leaders. Religion played a crucial role in Roman society, with an extensive pantheon of gods and goddesses worshipped by the populace. Temples dedicated to these deities dotted the landscape of the empire, acting as centers for religious ceremonies and festivals. The Roman calendar was filled with religious observances, demonstrating the importance of religion in daily life. As we delve deeper into the life of the Romans, we begin to see a society that is both familiar and alien to us. Their customs, traditions, and daily routines offer a fascinating glimpse into a civilization that, despite its eventual decline, has left an enduring legacy on the world. As the night draws in, let us take a moment to appreciate the complexity and richness of Roman life during the peak of the empire. Tomorrow, we will continue our journey exploring the political and military aspects of Rome at its zenith. For now, however, let's close our eyes and dream of the grandeur that was Rome, as we delve deeper into our exploration of life during the peak of the Roman Empire, or Pax Romana. We move our focus from the bustling streets and the grandeur of the public spaces to the intimate settings of Roman homes. The home, or domus, was a critical part of Roman society, and it offers us a fascinating glimpse into the daily life of the period. Roman homes varied greatly depending on the wealth and status of their owners. The rich lived in spacious, opulent houses decorated with intricate mosaics and fresco, while the poor resided in cramped multi-story apartment buildings known as insel. The dois, the traditional home of the wealthy Roman, was a marvel of architectural design. The typical dois consisted of several rooms, including a dining room, triclinium, bedrooms, tubicular, a kitchen, and a study or office, tablinum. At the heart of the domus was the atrium, a large open central space with an opening in the roof that allowed rainwater to collect in a shallow pool below, called the impluvium. This ingenious design provided natural light and ventilation while also serving a practical function. The walls of these homes were often adorned with intricate fresco depicting scenes from mythology, landscapes, or daily life. Floors were often covered in mosaics, painstakingly crafted from tiny colored tiles. The themes of these mosaics range from simple geometric patterns to complex scenes from mythology, history, or the natural world. These decorative elements were more than just aesthetic. They were a way for the homeowner to display their wealth, taste, and education. The Romang du was also a place of work. Many wealthy Romans had shops or offices attached to their homes where they conducted their business affairs. Slaves performed much of the actual labor, whether it be managing a shop, cooking meals, or cleaning the home. The treatment of slaves varied greatly, but in many cases, they were considered part of the family and were treated with respect. In contrast to the Dois, the insulae were crowded, multi-story apartment buildings that housed the city's lower classes. These buildings were often poorly constructed and prone to fires and collapses. The apartments themselves were small and cramped, often with a single room serving as both a living and sleeping area. Despite these hardships, the insulae were vibrant places teeming with life and activity. Food and dining were central aspects of Roman life. Meals were simple for the lower classes, often consisting of grain, vegetables, and occasionally meat or fish. The wealthy, however, indulged in extravagant feasts that showcased their wealth and status. A typical banquet might include a range of dishes from oysters to peacock, accompanied by fine wines, and followed by entertainment such as music, dancing, or poetry readings. Education was highly valued in Roman society. Children were taught at home by their parents or private tutors until the age of 7 when they began formal schooling. Boys and girls were educated separately, with boys learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and rhetoric, while girls were taught spinning, weaving, and other domestic skills. Religion permeated every aspect of Roman life, from the public rituals performed in the temples and at the public games to the private ceremonies conducted in the home. Each home had a small shrine or lararium where the household gods were worshipped. These gods or lists were believed to protect the home and its inhabitants. In our next section, we will explore the fascinating world of Roman entertainment, where gladiatorial contests and chariot races captured the imagination of the populace and provided a welcome distraction from the challenges of daily life. As we continue our journey through the peak of the Roman Empire, let your mind wander through the streets of Rome. From the grand villas of the wealthy to the bustling insula of the poor, imagining the sights, sounds, and smells of this remarkable period in history. As we continue our exploration of life during the peak of the Roman Empire, we now turn our attention towards the political structure and the military that formed the backbone of this historical powerhouse. At the heart of the Roman political system was the Senate, an advisory council made up of Rome's most prestigious citizens. The Senate held enormous sway over the Roman state and was composed of lifelong members, usually former magistrates. The Senate was not only a political body, but also a social institution, a sort of gentleman's club where the elite could discuss matters of state and society. The Senate's primary role was to advise the magistrates and the people, but its decisions, known as anatis consultor, held significant weight. The Roman Empire was a period of autocracy, with the emperor holding supreme power. However, maintaining the illusion of the republic was important, and emperors often went to great lengths to secure the Senate's approval. The emperor would propose legislation which the Senate would then approve. In reality, the Senate had no real power to oppose the emperor, but their endorsement gave the emperor's decisions an aura of legitimacy. The emperor could not rule alone, and the imperial court was a complex web of officials, advisors, and family members. The emperor's household, the domus, was the administrative hub of the empire. Here, the emperor was surrounded by a multitude of advisors, freedmen, slaves, and family members who helped him rule. The court was a hotbed of intrigue, with factions vying for the emperor's favor. The Roman Empire was not just a political entity. It was also a massive military machine. The Romans had a professional standing army, the first of its kind in history. The backbone of this army was the legions, units of about 5,000 men each, which were further divided into centuries of around 80 men. The legions were not just fighting forces. They were also engineering corps, building roads, bridges, and fortifications across the empire. Each legion was a self-contained unit with its own command structure, medical staff, engineers, and even a small navy. The soldiers were well-trained and disciplined, with a strict hierarchy and a code of conduct. The legions were not just for war. They also served as a police force, maintaining law and order in the provinces. The key to the success of the Roman military was its adaptability. The Romans would often adopt the tactics and weapons of the enemies they defeated, integrating them into their own military doctrine. This adaptability, combined with the discipline and organization of the legions, made the Roman army a formidable force. The Roman navy also played a crucial role in the empire's expansion. It was responsible for protecting the sea routes that were vital for trade and communication. The navy was not as prestigious as the legions, but it was essential for maintaining the empire's security and prosperity. Life in the Roman military was hard, but it offered opportunities for social advancement. A career in the army or the navy was a path to citizenship for many provincials. Soldiers were rewarded with land, money, and the opportunity to climb the social ladder. As we delve deeper into the political and military structure of the Roman Empire, we see an intricate system of checks and balances, a complex web of relationships, and a military machine that was as innovative as it was efficient. These elements combined to create an empire that lasted for centuries, leaving a lasting legacy on the world. As we transition from the political and military aspects of Roman life, our next section will focus on the cultural and social facets of the Roman Empire, examining the daily lives of its citizens from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. Rest assured, there is still much to discover about this remarkable period in human history. As we delve deeper into the heart of the Roman Empire at its peak, it becomes increasingly clear that the Romans lived in a world that was both similar and alien to our own. Let us take a closer look at the day-to-day life of an average Roman citizen living during the height of the empire around the 2 North Century AD. Romans awoke with the sunrise, often to the sounds of the bustling city streets. As the sun's first rays began to peek over the horizon, Rome would already be coming alive with the noises of vendors setting up their stalls, the clatter of horses and carts on the cobblestone streets, and the distant ringing of blacksmiths' hammers. Most Romans lived in small apartments or houses, often sharing their space with extended family or lodges. These dwellings were typically made of brick and concrete with a flat roof that could be used for additional living space or even a small garden. Breakfast in Rome was a simple affair. Most Romans would begin their day with a meal of bread, cheese, and perhaps some olives or dried fruit. This would be washed down with a cup of pusca, a sour wine diluted with water, which was a common drink throughout the empire. After breakfast, the men of the house would usually head off to work or to the forum, while the women would remain at home to oversee the household chores. A Roman workday was fairly short by modern standards, often ending in the early afternoon. This was partly due to the hot Mediterranean climate, which made it impractical to work during the hottest part of the day. After work, many Romans would head to the baths, a key part of Roman social life. These weren't just places to get clean, but were also spaces for socializing, exercising, and even conducting business. Roman baths were grand, elaborate buildings, often featuring a series of heated rooms and pools. Visitors would typically start in therium, a warm room that helped to open the pores before moving to the hotter caldarium. After sweating in the heat, they would plunge into the cold waters of the frigidarium. Many baths also had gymnasiums, libraries, and even barber shops. The Romans took their bathing very seriously, viewing it as both a social duty and a mark of civilization. After their visit to the baths, Romans would return home for cena, the main meal of the day. This was a leisurely affair, often lasting several hours and featuring a range of dishes. A typical Roman cena might include a starter of eggs or a salad, followed by a main course of meat or fish, and finishing with a dessert of fruit or honeyed cakes. Wine was a common accompaniment to the meal, usually served watered down. Evening in Rome was a time for relaxation and entertainment. Many Romans would attend the theater or watch gladiatorial games at the Colosseum. Others might visit a tavern for a drink and some gambling, or enjoy a leisurely stroll around the city. As darkness fell, the streets of Rome would be lit by oil lamps, casting a warm, flickering glow over the city. Despite the many similarities to our own lives, it's important to remember that life in the Roman Empire was also marked by vast inequalities. Slavery was a fundamental part of Roman society, and the lives of slaves were often harsh and brutal. At the other end of the scale, the Roman elite lived lives of unimaginable luxury, feasting on exotic dishes and wearing garments of the finest silk. As we close this section of our journey through the Roman Empire, we are reminded of the extraordinary complexity and diversity of this ancient civilization. Rome was a city of contrasts, where grandeur and squalor existed side by side. It was a place where the mundane and the extraordinary were intertwined, creating a society that continues to fascinate us over 2,000 years later. As we continue our exploration in the sections to come, we will delve further into the intricacies of Roman society, shedding more light on this remarkable period in history. As we continue our journey through the historical era of the Roman Empire, let's delve into the daily life and customs during the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, a period of stability and relative peace that lasted from 27 BC to 180 AD. This era was marked by significant growth and prosperity with the empire as boundaries extending from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, Spain in the west, and Mesopotamia in the east. At the heart of the empire was the city of Rome itself, a bustling metropolis of over 1 million people. Its citizens were a diverse mix of not just Romans, but also Greeks, Jews, Gauls, Germans, Britons, Thracians, Egyptians, and many others from the far corners of the empire. Rome was the hub of trade, politics, and culture, with magnificent public buildings and luxurious private homes, showcasing the wealth and power of the empire. Roman society was strictly hierarchical. At the top of the social pyramid were the senators, members of the oldest and wealthiest families of Rome, who held most of the political power. Below them were the equestrians, wealthy businessmen and professionals. The bulk of the population were the plebeians, free citizens who could vote but held little political power. At the bottom were the slaves who had no rights and were considered property. Life in Rome was a blend of work, leisure, and public participation. Most Romans worked 6 days a week, with businesses and shops opening early in the morning and closing in the afternoon. Many Romans were traders, artisans, or farmers, though some held jobs as teachers, doctors, or civil servants. Slaves performed much of the manual labor, from construction work and rowing ships to household chores. Despite the long hours of work, Romans also knew how to enjoy life. Public baths were a popular place for socializing after a day's work, where Romans could relax, play games, and discuss politics. The Romans loved their games. From board games like tabula, similar to backgammon, to physical activities like wrestling and horse racing, the most popular spectator sport was the gladiatorial games, where trained fighters battled each other, or wild animals in front of large cheering crowds. Food was another important aspect of Roman life. Most Romans ate 3 meals a day, a light breakfast, a main meal at midday, and a light dinner in the evening. The diet of the common Roman consisted mostly of cereals, bread, cheese, fruits, vegetables, and occasionally meat. The wealthy, on the other hand, indulged in extravagant feasts with exotic dishes, fine wines, and elaborate desserts. Education was highly valued in Roman society. Wealthy families often employed tutors to educate their children at home, while poorer families sent their children to school. Boys and girls both received basic education, but higher education was reserved mostly for boys. Subjects taught included reading, writing, arithmetic, music, and rhetoric, with the latter being particularly important for those aspiring to a political career. Religion was a central aspect of Roman life, with every home having a small shrine to the household gods. The Romans honored a wide pantheon of gods and goddesses, each presiding over different aspects of life. Temples were common sights in Rome, and religious festivals, sacrifices, and processions were frequent occurrences. The Romans also believed in divination and consulted soothsayers for guidance on important decisions. As we immerse ourselves in the tapestry of daily life during the Pax Romana, we can better appreciate the complex society and culture that the Romans built. Join us in our next segment as we further explore the political and military systems of the Roman Empire and the extraordinary engineering feats that still inspire awe today. As you drift into sleep, imagine the bustling streets of Rome, the cheering crowds in the Colosseum, and the quiet whisper of prayers in the temples. And let the echoes of this ancient civilization lull you into peaceful dreams. As we delve deeper into the grandeur of the Roman Empire, we now shift our gaze towards the societal structure that formed the backbone of this great civilization. The structure of Roman society was very hierarchical, and it was broadly divided into the categories of patricians, who were the aristocratic families, the plebeians, the common people, and the slaves. The patricians were the elite of Roman society. They were the wealthy landowners and the political leaders. They lived in large, luxurious houses, often on hills overlooking the city, and they enjoyed a life of leisure and luxury. They would spend their days in the forum, discussing politics, attending religious festivals, or watching gladiatorial games. The patricians were also the ones who held high offices in the government, including the position of consul, the highest elected office in the Roman Republic. In stark contrast to the patricians, the plebeians were the common people of Rome. They were the farmers, the tradesmen, the soldiers, and the laborers. Though they made up the majority of the population, they had little political power and were often at the mercy of the patricians. However, over time, the plebeians were able to win certain rights and privileges, including the right to elect tribunes who could veto the actions of the consuls. Despite these gains, the life of a plebeian was often hard, with long hours of work and little time for leisure. However, it is important to note that the line between plebeians and patricians was not always clear-cut. Many plebeians were able to gain wealth and status through their efforts in trade or military service. These new men, as they were called, often tried to emulate the lifestyle of the patricians, building large houses and sponsoring public games and festivals. Slavery was a significant part of Roman society and the economy. Slaves were used for a variety of tasks from agricultural labor to household chores. They could be bought and sold at markets, and they were often treated harshly by their masters. However, it was possible for a slave to earn their freedom, and freed slaves could become citizens, albeit with limited rights. The Romans had a unique way of looking at wealth and status. Unlike many societies, they did not necessarily equate wealth with virtue. Instead, they valued a concept they called dignitas, which can be loosely translated as dignity or prestige. This was a measure of a person's influence, reputation, and standing in society. A person could increase their dignitas by serving in the military, holding public office, or sponsoring public works. In terms of entertainment, the Romans had a love for spectacle and drama. A Colosseum with its gladiatorial games was the epitome of this. These games, often sponsored by wealthy patricians, would draw crowds of tens of thousands. Gladiators, who were often slaves or criminals, would fight to the death for the entertainment of the crowd. The Romans also loved theater, and plays were often performed at festivals and religious ceremonies. Religion played a crucial role in Roman society, and it was deeply ingrained in every aspect of life. The Romans worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each with their own domain and responsibilities. Religious festivals were a common occurrence, and they often involved sacrifices, prayers, and processions. The Romans believed that by honoring the gods in these ways, they could ensure their favor and protection. Education was highly valued in Roman society, and it was seen as key to advancing one's status. Wealthy Romans would hire tutors for their children, who would teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, and the classics. The goal of education was not only to impart knowledge, but also to instill the values and virtues that were important to Roman society. In conclusion, life during the peak of the Roman Empire was characterized by a sharp division between the classes, a love for spectacle and drama, a deep respect for the gods, and a strong emphasis on education. Despite the hardships faced by many, it was a society marked by a rich culture and a deep sense of dignity and honor. It's easy to see how this complex and vibrant society was able to dominate the ancient world for so many centuries. In the previous sections, we have discussed the rise of the Roman Empire, its political structure, and the daily life of its citizens. In this part, we will delve into the social structure and the dynamics of Roman society during its peak. The Roman Empire, like any other ancient civilization, was marked by a rigid social hierarchy. At the top of this echelon were the patricians, who were the aristocrats, essentially the ruling class who held most of the political power. They were the descendants of the original senators of Rome, chosen by Romulus, the mythological founder of Rome. Patrician families enjoyed many privileges, including the exclusive right to hold certain high offices such as consul and censor. Their wealth came from large estates or latifundia worked by slaves or tenant farmers. Below the patricians were the equestrians, also known as the equites or the knight class. Initially, this class was defined by their ability to afford a horse for military service, but over time it evolved into a wealthy business class. They were involved in various commercial activities, including tax collection, and often served as public contractors. Their economic power eventually allowed them to wield substantial political influence, despite not having the same formal political rights as the patricians. The largest class by far was the plebeians, who were free Roman citizens, not part of the patrician or equestrian classes. They were the artisans, merchants, farmers, and laborers who formed the backbone of the Roman economy. While they had the right to vote, they were initially barred from holding higher political offices. However, through collective action and protest, known as the conflict of the Fiat, orders the plebeians gradually won political concessions, including the right to hold the consulship and the establishment of tribunes, who were officials elected to protect their interests. At the very bottom of the social pyramid were the slaves and freed men. Slavery was an integral part of Roman society, with slaves being used for various tasks from household chores to gladiatorial combat. It's important to note that Roman slavery was not based on race, but rather on capture in war, punishment for crime, or the inability to pay debts. Freed men, on the other hand, were former slaves who had either bought their freedom or had been granted it by their masters. Although freedmen had most of the rights of a Roman citizen, they were not viewed as social equals by the free-born citizens. The social structure of Rome also had a gendered aspect. While men dominated the public sphere, women in Rome had a degree of personal and economic independence not common in the ancient world. They could own property, engage in business, and initiate divorce. However, they could not vote or hold public office. The Roman Empire was also renowned for its multiculturalism. With the expansion of the empire, a multitude of cultures, languages, and religions were absorbed into Roman society. This cultural diversity was evident in all aspects of Roman life, from its cuisine and fashion to its religious practices and artistic expressions. During the peak of the Roman Empire, social mobility was possible to an extent. A plebeian could amass wealth and join the equestrian class. A slave could be freed and become a wealthy businessman. And an equestrian could enter the Senate if he met the property qualification. However, these instances were exceptions rather than the norm, with the vast majority of individuals remaining in the social class they were born into. Overall, Roman society during the peak of the empire was a complex and stratified system that afforded different levels of privilege and power to its members. Despite its inherent inequalities, it also offered opportunities for advancement that were relatively rare in the ancient world. In the next section, we will explore the military structure and the causes behind the Roman Empire's remarkable military success. Please close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare to journey into the world of the Roman legions. As the sun would set over the horizon, the city of Rome would transform into a vibrant, nocturnal metropolis. Street vendors would close their stalls. Laborers would return from the fields, and the city's many taverns and baths would begin to light up, their warm glow casting shadows on the cobbled streets. Among the most famous of these establishments was the Thermae of Caracalla. Constructed in the 3rd century A.D., this grand bathhouse was much more than a place to bathe and socialize. It was a multifunctional leisure center, complete with libraries, gardens, and even a gymnasium. Patrons of the day would start their visit in the apothecarium, a changing room lined with wooden lockers. From there, they would proceed to the tepidarium, a room of moderate temperature where they would begin the process of sweating out impurities. Then they would move on to the colarium, a hot bath, and finally the frigidarium, a cold pool designed to close the pores and invigorate the body. This ritual not only promoted hygiene, but also relaxation and camaraderie among the patrons, who ranged from politicians to poets, generals to gladiators. After a visit to the bathhouse, Romans might attend a banquet, another cornerstone of social life in the empire. These events were extravagant affairs, with guests reclining on couches and enjoying delicacies like roasted peacock and stuffed dormice. The wealthier the host, the more lavish the banquet, with some aristocrats employing professional entertainers to amuse their guests. Music, poetry, and even acrobatic performances were all common features of these events. But life in the Roman Empire was not all leisure and luxury. There was also a darker side to the society, one that was characterized by inequality and brutality. While the wealthy enjoyed the comforts of villas and banquetes, the poor lived in squalid conditions, often in cramped multi-story apartment buildings known as insuli. These buildings were prone to collapse and fire, and the residents often lacked basic amenities like running water or sanitation. Moreover, the empire was built on the backs of slaves, who performed a wide range of tasks from manual labor in the fields to domestic service in the homes of the wealthy. Slaves were considered property and were often treated harshly, and their only hope for freedom was through manumission, a process by which a slave could be freed by their master. Despite these challenges, the Roman Empire was a remarkably stable society characterized by a strong legal system and efficient administration. The Romans were skilled engineers, constructing a vast network of roads and aqueducts that facilitated trade and communication across the empire. They were also innovative architects, pioneering the use of concrete and the arch, innovations that allowed them to build magnificent structures like the Colosseum and the Pantheon. Additionally, the Romans were known for their literary and artistic achievements. Poets like Virgil and Ovid penned epic works that are still studied today, while sculptors created realistic portraits of emperors and gods. Even everyday objects like pottery and jewelry were often intricately decorated, reflecting the Romans' appreciation for beauty and craftsmanship. In the end, life during the peak of the Roman Empire was a study in contrasts. It was a time of unprecedented wealth and power, but also of poverty and oppression. It was a society that valued education and culture, but also reveled in spectacle and excess. And though the empire would eventually fall, its influence can still be seen today in everything from our architecture to our legal system, our language to our culture. As we continue our journey through this fascinating period, we will delve deeper into the lives of the people who lived during this time, exploring their customs, beliefs, and daily routines.